Have you ever wanted to play Pokemon Black 2 but with Pokemon that go up to Generation 7? Well, don't look any further because Pokemon Moon Black 2 has got you covered. It has basically got the same storyline of Pokemon Black 2, but Team Skull and a load of other characters have been added in from Pokemon Sun and Moon. Not only that, because Ash was also a Alola champion, he will be in the game too, and he'll become one of your two rivals. I know there's not a lot of DS ROM hacks out there, but this one is really special. I've never seen any Pokemon past Generation 5 being introduced in a DS game, and we're going to be taking it on with only Dark-type Pokemon. If you could smash 8,201 like, that would be amazing, and with all of that out of the way, let's crunch our way through Pokemon Moon Black 2. As we spawn in, we get greeted by Professor Kukui, and his 2D sprite looks super cool, just like his sunglasses. We then get to pick between the two Sun and Moon characters. I decide to go with the boy. His little overworld sprite reminds me a little bit of one of Team Aqua. Our rival here is going to be Gladion, so it's going to be nice to see him touch his face so many times. And we then spawn into the world, and upon heading outside of our house, we meet up with Gladion immediately. He's super excited that we're getting our very first Pokemon today, and even wants to come with me because he's that good of a friend. So we go up to Bianca and we can obviously choose between Rowlet, Poplio, or Litten. Since we're going with a dark type run, I went with Litten, even though Rowlet is probably my favorite of the three. But what's your favorite Alola starter? Don't tell me it's Poplio though. Name Litten after one of my cats. I mean, just look how cute he is. And after getting my Pokedex, Bianca sends me out into the wild world to go and find all the Pokemon. But Gladion steps in and asks Bianca if he can also get a Pokedex and a Pokemon because he wants to go on a journey of his own. Luckily, he gets one from Bianca, and once he gets his starter Poplio, he wants me to be his very first Pokemon battle. The only real thing I can do here is spam tackle, so that's what I do. Gladion then heads off because he wants to go and battle some wild Pokemon to get stronger. We then try to leave our town and go on our very own journey, but we get stopped by one of the receptionists, and she normally gives you a bike, but the bike here has been changed to a go-goat. How cool is that? But you know what would be even cooler? If you join my Discord server. I'm trying to live it up a little bit because it's kind of dead right now, so if you want to help me breathe a little bit of life into it again, you can always join. The link is in the description. On the very first route, I also capture my very first Pokemon, Alolan Meowth. Speaking of Alolan Pokemon, I also grab an Alolan Rattata, which honestly just looks like a black rat and not really the Alolan Rattata. We bring Elder to the hospital again because he keeps on jumping off cliffs. On the next route, we find out that there is actually trainers from Alola here too. And then we find our way over to Rockruff Ranch. Gladion already wants his second rival battle. He lives up to the ranch's name because he has a Rockruff of himself, but Milo, my second cat, is able to nibble away at him with bites. And in the second Pokemon Poplio, we had a ton of luck because at first he was going to take me out with water guns, but then when I got into range of him taking me out, I just spammed tackle while he kept on going for growl like 4 times in a row. Gotta love stupid AI. The owners of the ranch then come up to us as they need our help because one of their Lycanrocs has been stolen by Team Skull. And I love the little detail that the Lycanrocs actually have overworld sprites now. They also give us some Rockruff bands which can be used to evolve Rockruffs into Lycanrocs. We quickly find the Team Skull Grunt. He says that his team is trying to take over the Alola region and seems very frustrated as he throws the frustration TM at me. He then flees and the rancher comes back up to me and he's super happy that his Lycanroc is back. So after they go back home, we head back to town where Alder's been waiting for me for a Pokemon battle with his 2 students. And here is where I realize that this game also has special Unovian forms. And the first one we run into is Cyndaquil, which is now a Fire Steel type. But there will be a ton more spread throughout this video. So if you love new forms from already existing Pokemon, you're going to love this game. And I also haven't told you guys that this game is actually based on Pokemon Blaze Black 2, an amazing ROM hack by Dreyano that I've done a 100-hour video on. If you want to know more about the real core of this game, I recommend watching that video too. But before you do that, listen to this important announcement. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. In my career as a YouTuber, I've obviously struggled with mental health issues, as most of you have, and this was definitely prominent in the lockdown period. Not being able to go outside and see your friends, talk with other people, and socialize, that really chipped away at me. And yeah, obviously you can talk to family, you can talk to your friends, you can talk to your girlfriend, boyfriend, but sometimes that's just not enough, and that's where BetterHelp can definitely help you out. They make therapy super accessible for you. You don't have to go out to find a therapist, you just have to fill out a questionnaire, and in the span of a couple of days, it can set you up with a professional therapist, and then you just go from there. So if you're struggling yourself, I highly recommend that you check out BetterHelp. You can do that by clicking the link in the description or going to betterhelp.com/zwiggo. That won't only help out the channel, but also you, because you get 10% off your very first month if you use my link. A huge thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video, and for now, let's get right back into it. But now it's time to take on the very first gym leader, and no, it's not Sharon, it's the Pokemon Black 2 protagonist, Nate. And he doesn't really specialize in one type here, starting off with a Scyther that Joey can take down with Embers before Growlithe comes out, so I bring in my cat for a real cat-dog fight, but it turned out to be way easier than I thought, as I just went for Fake Out and 2 bites to bring out the last Pokemon, Sil Valley. I hit 3 bites in a row, but things got scary when he set up a workup and then killed me with 2 aerial aces. So I decided to send out Joey first with the Intimidate, spam Fire Fang and Double Kick, but because of its berry, it was able to survive and take out my second cat as well. Time for the rat to step in. And the rat does what it does best, eat the cheese. And that's our very first gym badge acquired, so we leave the gym and run into Bianca, who has a reunion with Nate. And since we all seem to get along pretty well, we exchange phone numbers. Professor Kukui then calls us all together, and he looks very different. He or she is already super proud that I've managed to get my first gym badge, and then Gladion comes along because he also wants a fight with Nate. Bianca then upgrades my Pokédex so that it will include a habitat list, which basically just means you can see which Pokemon can appear on the route that you're on. Litten evolves into the majestic Torracat, and just before reaching Verbank City, I capture a Seedot and evolve it into Nuzleaf, a nice grass dark type that doesn't learn any grass type moves. We then reach Verbank City and go straight to the complex there to grab our next encounter, Alolan Grimer, a very nice dark poison type that doesn't have all that many weaknesses compared to our other dark types. With Goober on the team, I just do one more evolution, Rattata into Raticate, and even though it's an Alolan Raticate, he doesn't turn fat. But it is now time to take on Roxy, and she has an Alolan Grimer of her own. Joey, however, is able to Fire Fang his way through it, but Toxapex at level 20 is a little bit too bulky for him. Sludge Waves poison me and take me out. I bring in my Raticate, Dottie, and Hyper Fang twice to bring out Krogunk, but a priority Vacuum Wave is 4 times super effective, and my Rat is not going to take that very well. I don't really have anything for this Krogunk, so I bring in Goober and just start biting, which turns out to just work. And the last Pokemon, Marini, also gets engulfed by my pile of sludge. I run into Team Skull again, who are trying to steal some Pokemon, and while we're talking to them, the building straight up disappears. So me and the squad show them what real Pokemon trainers look like, and after losing, they flee to Route 20, so we go after them like a raging bull, and after catching up to them and beating them up once again, we get a clue that they're traveling around by boat. So it's time to check out every port around the world, and I'm just hoping we can check out Gadian Port because I love the music there. And check out Nanu, who's also been standing around on this dog, and we show him that we're obviously the best dark type trainer. We then arrive in Castelia City and head straight to Ilima's gym, but he doesn't seem to be around because he's out searching for art. That's when Ash arrives, and this is our first meeting with him, so we tell him about Team Skull and that we're after them. And he seems to know where they might be hiding at, and he takes us to the sewers. Not the place I really want it to be right now, but I guess we're going to have to go through it together with Gladion, and Ash was right because we found Team Skull down here where they belong. So after they flee, we run into Colress, which is kind of cool because Colress is also in Pokemon Sun and Moon, kind of, but here he just plays the same role as in Black and White too, so we'll skip over that until Ilima shows up and gives me the HM for strength as well as the authority to go and challenge his gym, but he will make sure that Team Skull will never operate in Castelia City ever again. But let's see what Ilima's normal types can do against my dark ones. Well, as it turns out, nothing, because I just double-kicked every single one of them. I am very thankful for this one little black cat that decided to join my team and help me wreck my foes. And now after getting this third gym badge, it's time to take on Kolres, who's scaring away a horde of Pangoros, who's normally a dark fighting type, so I could use him on my team. But for some stupid reason, they decided to change Pangoro's type in this ROM hack to pure fighting, meaning I can't use it. Luckily for me, there is a way better dark fighting type waiting for me in the desert. But first, let's take on this mad scientist with a weird thing around his head. Leading off with a Magnemite that goes down easily by Raticate's crunches. But his Rotom fan form is a signal beam user, which almost my entire team will suffer from. Luckily, Raticate can almost bring it down into red health with a crunch before going down, so I bring in Milo to outspeed with a priority fake out and a bite, which forces out Metang, which is another 2-shot with bite, but Porygon 2 with Eviolite is the bane of my existence. I barely do any damage to it, and it copies my Technician ability. And after it takes down my Persian with Tri-attacks, I bring in my Torracat, and just when I think I'm about to kick it into outer space, it decides to use Recover. So the only way I can take this down is by setting up some workups, and then making sure this little duck never quacks again. And the last Pokemon is a new form of Croconaw, a water electric type that's now a special attacker, and honestly something I would love to use. So if you would like to see me do a playthrough of this game with only new forms, I would absolutely love to do that. Anyway, Joey's double kick wasn't enough to finish off the crocodile, so I had to bring in Goober to survive another water pulse, counter back with a bite, and get rid of Kolres, meaning that we can go to the desert to get a ton of encounters, starting out with a Cacnea, an arguably way better grass dark type than Nutty, once it evolves into Cacturne that is, and secondly was Scraggy, the better fighting target type, just because it gets access to Moxie. But he isn't the only Moxie user. No, I also grab a Sandile named Dundee, and finally this Solnerd, the Vullaby, who will be an amazing tank once we can get it up to a Mandibuzz. But its evolutionary level is ridiculous, so that's going to take a while. We then do 3 very important evolutions: Torracat into Incineroar, Sandile into Krokorok, and finally Cacnea into Cacturne. We ride a roller coaster and crash our way into a fashion show, which is led by Mallow. I also really love the art in the background that they show, and this just makes me feel like Mallow really fits the fashion show theme of this gym. But she is very unlucky just because she uses grass-type Pokemon. And if you hadn't realized yet, my starter is a fire-type, and him combined with my poison-type Goober just made for the perfect combo as we take down Roselia with crunches from Goober, Leafeon falls to some Fire Fangs from Joey, Nuzleaf is super weak, so that's just one Fire Fang, but Go-Goat manages to survive and knows the move Rock Slide, which my Joey is weak to, and because I'm also leech-seeded, I eventually do get sapped out. Scraggy is able to finish it off with a high jump kick, but Sceptile is able to set up a workup just as it comes out and kills me with a Leaf Blade straight after, but I did do some great damage with high jump kick once more. One more crunch from Dottie and Mallow's Pokemon have all been eaten. 4th gym badge acquired. Gladion also fights by my side against Team Skull because they seem to have stolen his little sister's Vulpix about 5 years ago. That's the main goal why he tries to defeat Team Skull, not because they're trying to take over the world or anything, just because they stole a Vulpix, which you can just capture in the wild if you want to. Anyway, on that sad note, we run into Ash, and this is where we have our very first battle with him, and boy, how good does that starting battle screen look. They're doing their Z moves animation, and I honestly don't think it can get any better than this. He only has 3 Pokemon so far: a Pikachu that gets crunched by Goober, a Lycanroc that gets killed by a Brick Break from Scraggy, and another crunch from Krokorok, and lastly a Torracat. So I'm guessing that maybe at the end of this run, he might have his full Alola team, which I'm very much looking forward to. Luckily, because of the Moxie, I only needed one more dig to take down this Torracat, and as a reward, he gives me a Charizard dyed Y, which might mean that you can also Mega Evolve in this game, which is also something I've never seen in a DS ROM hack. Sadly enough, we don't have a Charizard, so we're going to have to wait for another Mega Stone. Bianca shows me the art of the hidden pathways after that, where I can find a Froakie, capture it, and eventually evolve it into a Greninja, Greninja, which is going to be super useful as a water dark type. It doesn't have the protein ability, which makes it less overpowered, but it does have Battle Bond, which I'm also happy with. We see the old and the new Team Skull battling. I didn't know there was an old Team Skull, and the only real thing that's different about the old Team Skull is that they don't wear the hat anymore. And the old Team Skull seems to follow Guzma, while the new Team Skull seems to worship Lusamine. Personally, I definitely follow Guzma. He's the coolest evil team leader ever. So he brings me to his current leader, which is Plumeria. But before she explains anything and wants to take me inside of the church, she wants to battle me to see what kind of trainer I am. She starts out with a Gengar that Goober can crunch, but then a regional form of Arbok comes out, and I love this guy. And this guy is a ground poison type. If it was dark, I'd absolutely try and capture one. But for now, we'll just have to admire him from the standpoint of its enemy. Greninja can get its very first kill with a Water Pulse, and the last Pokemon is a Mareanie that we can just take out with a dig from Krokorok. Upon ending the battle, our Alolan Grimer evolves into the beautiful Rainbow Muck. It still looks like candy, and if it would be real, I'd probably give it a lick. Gladion then shows up, and we head inside together with Plumeria. Here she goes on to explain that they have now changed their ways and are actually taking care of Pokemon instead of hurting them. So Gladion asks if the Vulpix that they stole from him so many years ago is actually here, but it turns out it's not. Plumeria apologizes, and the only thing she can really do for us is give us a Wimpod, which we kindly decline because it's not a dark type. That's when we go to the local gym, and sadly enough, my favorite gym leader of all time, Clay, is not here. He's been replaced by Saxophocles. But before I actually take him on, I evolve my Scraggy into Scrafty and Krokorok into Crocodile, giving me a much needed power increase. However, my Scrafty isn't even able to take down his first Pokemon, Ampharos. I spam 4 high jump kicks, but because he has a healing potion, that's basically obsolete. I managed to get him down into red health. Scrafty ultimately got electrocuted, so I brought in Greninja, the Pokemon that should normally be really bad against his gym, to take down Ampharos and the next Pokemon, Alolan Graveler. I also hit one more Water Pulse on the Vigavolt that comes out, which looks great by the way, and with a finishing move of Bug Buzz, Greninja faints and Joey comes in with the Fire Fang to take down this airplane bug. His electric type Feraligatr is an absolute menace and destroys me with Hydro Pump. So I hit a gunk shot with Muck and managed to poison it for maximum damage, but a Hydro Pump from full health still takes down my bulkiest Pokemon in just one hit. That's just gotta show you how strong this alligator really is. I bring in my Cactus, and because of the poison damage, he does go down, but he is able to hit me with another move, and the next Pokemon, Togedemaru, finishes me off with an Iron Head. I still have Crocodile left, so I hope for the dig, 4 times super effective, easy kill, Quake Badge acquired, as well as the Earthquake TM from an electric type gym leader. They could have at least changed this to Thunderbolt in my opinion. I also find it a little bit disappointing that they couldn't change the gym designs, but I guess ROM hacking on DS games is way harder than GBA ones. Our next stop is the Pokemon World Championship, which was the easiest thing I've ever had to do because the Pokemon here are level 25 while mine are level 40 already. So after lifting our very first trophy, we hear that Team Skull is somewhere around here and up to no good. So we go on and follow them and end up on their ship. Don't really know why Team Skull has a ship, but as it turns out, it was just an ambush for us. So me, Nate, and Gladion take on hordes of Team Skull grunts and come out on top, defeating every single one of them without much effort. Famba then comes along and throws us off the ship as he says that they're going to take over the Unova region with the legendary Pokemon Solgaleo and Lunala, and then he summons the Shadow Triad that looks like Mimikyu's, and they throw us off the ship. Me and the boys head over to Route 6, where we run into the buffest mosquito you've ever seen, and if this thing stings you, he will take more than just your blood. We then go on to enter Chargestone Cave and end up in Mistralton City. Here we see Professor Kukui, and he wants to evaluate my Pokédex by giving me a Master Ball as a reward, even though we've only captured like 15 of them. We also see Mina here, who tends to be the 6th gym leader, and I'm absolutely not looking forward to facing her and her fairy types because they will obliterate everything in sight. But first I go down to the Tower of the Ghosts, meet up with Ash, who gives me a free Meltan, and if this thing was a dark type, I would have loved to use it, but it isn't. But we can get a new dark type at the top of the tower, namely a Honchkrow, one of my 2 favorite dark types together with Weavile. So after adding the big boss Geo to my team, I went over to the fairy gym leader Mina in her flying type gym. I led off with Greninja to take down her first Pokemon Wigglytuff with 2 surfs while tanking a dazzling gleam. Mawile managed to survive a surf with like 1 HP remaining and countered back with a Thunder Fang, so Dundee had to take it out with Earthquake the next turn, while Ninetales came in and used this Ice Gem to power up its Blizzard and take me down in 1 hit. I do have kind of the perfect counter to Fairy types in Goober, as I just Gunk Shot this Ninetales back to the dumpster. I could have taken out the next Pokemon Primarina too if my Gunk Shot hadn't missed and had got destroyed by Hydro Pump and Scald. So I brought in my Scarecrow, used the Leech Seed, and stalled it out with Growths until I was at +6 and I killed it with Pin Missile. The next Pokemon was a Mr. Mime, but he outsped me and one-shot me, just like my next Pokemon Honchkrow, who I shouldn't even have brought out because Joey here had it all covered with some Fire Fangs. 6 gym badges down, only 2 more to go. I'm just wondering who those 2 might be. I also found out that Samson Oak was in the Pokemon Center here, and he had some pretty cool team members, like a Mega Venusaur that he didn't even have to Mega Evolve, and his very own Alolan Muck. After defeating the Professor and showing him why Professor Oak is the superior sibling, took the plane and actually traveled to the Alola region, before heading to Reversal Mountain where I capture a Drapion, another amazing dark poison type that was introduced in Generation 4. Why did Generation 4 introduce so many good dark types? I mean, even the next one that I captured in the Haunted House, Spiritomb, is from Generation 4. So with Soul Eater by my side, I head over to the volcano and went through it with Bianca, and at the end of it, 2 trainers were waiting for me, Ash and Serena. They want to have a double battle with me, see how strong we really got. Starting off with a Pikachu and a Delphox against Drapion and Dundee. I swap out Drapion for my Honchkrow because I was going for Earthquake on Dundee and didn't want to kill my own Pokemon, but it didn't really matter because the Delphox went first, hit Fire Blast, and my head-wearing crow was turned into a rotisserie chicken. I then do proceed to take both of their Pokemon down with 1 Earthquake. That's when I stopped having mercy. I Earthquake the next 2 Pokemon, Incineroar and Pangoro, just like the last 2, Lycanroc and a regional form of Delcatty that seems to be a ghost type. It could also be a dark type, but Delcatty's stats are kind of garbage, so I don't think I would even use it if I had the chance to capture it. After the battle, they got so scared that they just disappeared without saying a word. So that's when we also left Bianca in the dust, meet up with her again in Lacunosa town together with the professor. He tells me that we can head over to Opaloosid City, but before we do so, he takes me into a house with a random woman who goes on to explain the story of Necrozma as it crashed on Earth many years ago to create the giant chasm that is now its home where it resides, but it's a really dangerous Pokemon that can draw away all the light of this planet and basically destroy it. That's also the Pokemon that Team Plasma are after. They're going to try to combine Necrozma with either Solgaleo or Lunala to try and take over this region. Let's just hope they don't take away all the light in the process. So we have no more time to waste, we head on over to Opaloosid City, but just as we're about to leave Lacunosa town, we meet up with Gladion, who asks me what's up, and just when we start talking about our day, Faba shows up with a grunt. He once again goes on to threaten us about how Team Skull will take over the world and steal everybody's Pokemon so that they're the only ones that can use Pokemon and bend all the people of the world to their will. But Gladion goes on to say that the only thing he wants is his Vulpix back and is going to try and shake it out of Faba with the help of Force. So we decide to join him in this battle, but it really wasn't all that difficult, as the Grunt had some very questionable Pokemon and Faba just had 3 Psychic types, who fell very quickly to my super effective Dark types. Once we're done with them, they head over to Opaloosid City to continue their research, so we head after them in hopes to stop them. Just before we can reach him, we have to end this old man's 999 win streak, which might have broken his heart. In the end, he will definitely learn from this loss and not just end up with level 49 Pokemon. We also get ambushed by a bunch of wires. Yeah, I never really understood the concept of circuitry either. After putting them back into the ground where they belong, we restored the power in Opaloosid City and ran into one last trainer that had an Ice-type Meganium with a beautiful snowflake around its neck. But we also found out that when the weather changes, my Greninja changes form because of the battle bond. And I have to say, that's a very cool concept. Pellucid City is finally in our sights, and we meet up with Ash here, who tells me to go and take on the gym leader. This gym is obviously full of dragons, and what do dragons do? Well, they breathe fire, which makes the fire-type leader Kiawe perfect. But his team was a sweep with Greninja. Once I used Rain Dance, my battle bond activated, powering up my Surfs even more. So we one-shot Arcanine, Talonflame, Turtonator, Alolan Marowak, and finally the Steel Fire-type Typhlosion that also got washed away. With our 7 gym badge acquired, Team Skull ambushes Pellucid City, so in order to fend them off, I evolved my Nuzleaf into a Shiftry, and I also captured a Pupitar, which I evolved into Tyranitar, the king of the dark types. Kiawe then goes on to explain that he's guarding the DNA splicers, which you can use to fuse Necrozma with either one of the other legendaries. He wants to entrust them to me because he wants them to be safe. Then Team Skull freezes over the town. I don't know how they do this because they don't have a Kyurem to do so. I'm guessing they're somehow turning Necrozma's power into crystals that they shoot down. Kiawe throws out his Turtonator to try and break the crystals with Fire Punch, but it doesn't even scratch the surface. Baba and his grunts come along and demand the DNA splicers from us. Obviously, we're the good guys that we're not going to give them to them, so they go out to search for them themselves. So me and Kiawe drive away all of the grunts out of the town until we eventually reach Faba. I go on to battle him, and he has an Alakazam as his first Pokemon. Luckily, my Spiritomb can make quick work of that with a Dark Pulse, just like I killed the next Pokemon Alolan Raichu with a Sucker Punch. Gallade literally can't touch me with any of its moves, so we also take that down, and Hypno only has Psychic-type moves in his arsenal as well. So with some more Dark Pulses, we destroy Faba, and he retreats back to his ship. Even though he hates the cold, he still wants to cover the Unova region in ice, so I don't really get what he's on about, but that's when Kiawe shows up and hands the DNA splicers over to me. One of the Shadow Triads uses its special powers to teleport in between us and steal them. So we follow them around town and eventually manage to ambush them in a corner. That's when we finally see their actual sprite, and this has to be one of the best designed characters that I've ever seen. Anyway, after defeating his entire team, he still doesn't want to give back the DNA splicers, because he's not the one of the 3 that's holding them. So they manage to escape. That's when me and the squad group up together again and find out that they're probably heading to the Giant Chasm. So I head over to Humilau City, the place where the final gym leader is located. But before we go and take her on, I evolve my Inkay into a Malamar. But this Malamar is kind of useless because it doesn't have the contrary ability, which means my superpower is kind of useless. I also evolve Volibee into Mandibus, who will definitely be a very nice addition to the team, but now it's time to take on Lana. She has a very cool team, starting off with a Clawitzer, and I always love this guy in 2D sprites. In my opinion, they should have never changed to 3D. After Scrafty takes it out with some high jump kicks, Wishiwashi comes out. Another Pokemon that looks great in 2D, by the way. Because of my Moxie, my high jump kick does major damage, but we still get taken out by a Scald the turn after. So Scarecrow comes out, uses Needle Arm, and the big fish is no more. But Fraligator is way too strong as it one-shots me with an Ice Beam. That's the second gym leader that has this thing on its team, and it's the second one that starts obliterating me. Soul Eater then Dark Pulses twice and uses a Sucker Punch while tanking 2 Ice Beams with 12 HP remaining to win this matchup, but only just. Primarina takes him out, as well as my useless Malamar with Hydro Pumps, so I bring in Bono and just use 2 extra Sensories. Luckily the first one flinched and was a critical hit to bring out our last Pokemon, Cloyster, who also can survive 2 more extra Sensories. Once we get our final gym badge, he goes off for a swim and we get to talk with Gladion. He tells me that we should split up and I should go to Route 22, and over here I find the last Ultra Beast, Nihilego, and I would have loved for this to be Guzzlord so that I could add him to my team, but for now we're just going to have to defeat this giant jellyfish and steal Colress's device. I go and enter the cave of the Giant Chasm and capture a Sneasel here, and after using Colress's device and a Pangoro, we eventually reach a bay together with Galadion, where we see Team Skull's ship being docked. Upon entering and going to the heart of the ship, we find Faba and Necrozma. Here Faba goes on to explain that the ice crystals have indeed been made with Necrozma's energy, that he can't tell us anything else because we could become a threat if we know every one of their secrets. I do have to agree with that, so I guess I'll just have to beat up Faba. He still has the same 3 psychic types, and obviously gets destroyed by me and Gladion's Umbreon. Faba is so bad that even his grunt stands more of a chance of winning against us. Gladion then goes on to attack Faba once again about the Vulpix, and Faba says that it's probably being used by some of the lower grunts, and that he should probably just go out in the wild and capture a new Vulpix. Why is he even so fixated on this one? That's because that's the only Vulpix that his late grandpa caught for his little sister, and now we finally understand why he's so fixated on it. I would probably do the same if I was him. But Faba doesn't care about his sob story and sends the Shadow Triad on us to throw us off the ship, as they all of a sudden burst into the air and fly off. So Nate shows up behind us and tells us that they're flying to the giant chasm. He urges us to follow them while he's going to try and get the authorities involved. Upon entering the cave there, we see one of the X-Team Skull Grunts that's distracting some of the real Team Skull Grunts. After thanking him for his efforts, we head out of the cave and find Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh. And I couldn't hold myself from challenging her, so let's see if our Dark-type team is strong enough to take on possibly the strongest champion of all time. Started off with my Mandibuzz against her Spiritomb and set up 3 nasty plots and proceeded to take it out with 2 Dark Pulses, just like the next Pokemon, Gastrodon. This only left me with 40 HP in the end. This was still enough to take down Primarina with Air Slash, but this made me an easy target for Mega Garchomp, as it scorched my Vulture, causing me to swap in Rourke. I hit 1 high jump kick, but it healed with its Citrus Berry, bringing it back up to green HP before it took me out with 2 Earthquakes. I brought in my very own ground type and went for Outrage, but even this wasn't enough to bring out the big land shark. So my Frog has to drown it with a Surf. Lucario didn't go down to a Surf, countered back with an Aura Sphere, and squashed my beautiful Frog. So Soul Eater used 1 more Ominous Wind to take down the Aura Guardian, and the last Pokemon, Togekiss, didn't have a Fairy type move despite being a Fairy type, so with 4 more Ominous Winds, we defeated the Sinnoh champion. This doesn't make us champion of the Unova region, however, but we do get a nice Garchompite. We run into the clash between the old and new Team Skull, so Gladion tries to calm both of them down, but that doesn't work and we get attacked by 2 of Team Skull's grunts. After defeating them, Plumeria wishes me luck to try and stop the actual Team Skull by giving me some max revives. So I infiltrate the ship together with Gladion and run into Faba. By now you know what happens to Faba. He gets totally thrown off a cliff, but he does have a nice Mega Gallade and the Silvally added to the team. Despite these 2 additions, he really wasn't all that hard to beat. Colress, on the other hand, is not a good person, because he tried to destroy the world, just because he was trying to get the full potential out of Necrozma. So let's show him that being a bad guy never pays off. Guess what he starts off with? The bane of my existence, Alligator. But I'm actually super lucky because he sets up a Swords Dance, which allows me to set up a nasty plot, counter back with a Dark Pulse and a Sucker Punch to take it out without taking any casualties. His Mega Metagross gets 1 shot as well after being Volt switched in by Rotom Wash. His Rotom Wash comes out again, which I then Dark Pulse and Sucker Punch, but Alolan Golem finally eats my Soul Eater's soul. Luckily I have the perfect counter with an Earthquake from Dundee. He is no more, but Porygon Z's Ice Beam shreds through me. 1 high jump kick from Scrafty later, and Magnezone comes out, which I just have to break twice, and that ends Colress. So let's hope that we can now take on Necrozma without any more troubles. This lets us go to the boss's room, and we already know that it's going to be Lusamine. She goes on to explain that she made Colress the boss of Team Skull, that she would not have anticipated this. Me managing to beat him was not in her plans, but no matter, because she will still freeze over the entire region so that the world will bow to her feet. That's when the Shadow Triads show up and tell Lusamine that Necrozma is in place. Lusamine tells the Shadow Triads to deal with me, but Gladion shows up and asks about the Vulpix. That's when the Shadow Triad throws out an Alolan Ninetales, saying that this is the Vulpix that they stole 5 years ago and it doesn't even recognize Galadion anymore. If we manage to beat them in a Pokemon battle, we can get it back. So we destroy all 3 of them, but it says that it doesn't matter because the plan has already been put into motion. That's when they teleport teleport away and leave the Ninetales behind for Gladion. Gladion says that I have to chase after Lusamine while he will take care of Ninetales. We finally reach this giant chasm and confront Lusamine, who goes on to explain that this is the source of all the power of Necrozma, and from here they will be able to freeze the entire region. So she spawns it in out of nowhere, and she attacks me with a prismatic laser. But just at the right moment, somebody shouts, "Lunala, use Moongeist Beam," shattering the prismatic laser and saving my life. This is the man that abandoned Team Skull 2 years ago in search of a better life. Guzma. He's here to protect the Pokemon and the people of the region with his legendary Pokemon. But that's when the fight between Kyurem and Zekrom happens. I guess they couldn't really change this around. Ultimately, Necrozma is able to pin down Lunala, and they fuse together to create the moon form of Necrozma, which is an easy one-shot for my Spiritomb's Dark Pulse since it's a ghost psychic type. This separates the two Pokemon once more. This is not what Lusamine had expected. She bursts out in rage, doesn't transform into a Nihilego fusion, and instead attacks me. She starts out with a Clefable who doesn't have a fairy type move for my Soul Eater, so I just set up 3 nasty plots, but with its metronome it was able to hit an eruption, leaving me with only 84 HP. I send it to the Shadow Realm regardless, but Mega Sceptile's Leaf Storm cannonballs me into another dimension. So Dishonored comes in, uses 2 flies, and Mega Sceptile is out of here. But Genesect was something I wasn't expecting, definitely not at level 70. My Vulture is done picking on other Pokemon as I get flash cannoned. So I bring in Incineroar, go for the Fire Fang, and burn him as well, meaning that its Focus Sash is basically obsolete because the burn can take it out, but Joey also faints. Our last 3 Pokemon, the Ice-type Meganium, Beware, and Noivern, all fall to my Scrafty's high jump kicks and crunches, feeding Lusamine and stopping her plan of taking over the Unova region. Guzma goes on to confront her about all of this, but she doesn't want to listen, and the Shadow Triads show up to take her away, allowing her to not be punished for her actions. Guzma tells me to go and take on the Pokemon League so that I can become this region's strongest trainer, and totally believes I can do so. So he flies off with Lunala and we head over to Victory Road. Here we see Guzma one last time as he wishes me luck by giving me a Dragon Claw TM. He sees that me and my Pokemon are going to get past the Pokemon League and become a real legend. I know I say this every time I play Pokemon Black 2, but this is the most beautiful badge identification thing that they've ever done, and in my eyes, they will never top it. Me and the boys make our way through Victory Road's rugged terrain, and just as we're about to reach the Pokemon League, Gladion stops us for one last fight. The perfect way to end his journey. He leads off with a Primarina is what I thought, but then I went for a Dark Pulse with Spiritomb, and it turns out to be a Zoroark. It easily wins the matchup against my Spiritomb, and also one-shots my Scrafty with Focus Miss. Bring in my Rainbow Pile of Sludge and use Gunk Shot, which eventually takes it out combined with the poison damage, but for the next Pokemon, Lycanroc, I have to bring in Dundee. So I do what I do best, take it out with an Earthquake, while Primarina Hydro Pumps me to the lowest point of the sea the next turn. Greninja finishes it off with Extra Sensory and also kills his next Pokemon Silvally with 2 Hydro Pumps, but I have taken quite a lot of damage by now. Weavile is also able to take one more Hydro Pump, has no more mercy for Greninja, and slashes me into tiny little pieces. With one more Cross Chop from Joey, we end it off, and his last Pokemon, Umbreon, falls to a Cross Chop and a Flare Blitz combo, so this ended up being one of the closest fights we've had with only one more Pokemon remaining on my side. He thanks me for everything I've done for him and the Unova region, and he's going to go back to his hometown to reunite Ninetales with his little sister. He also gives me DHM for Dive and pushes me into the Pokemon League. Our very first battle is going to be against the Ghost-type leader, Acerola. And even though my Bird of Death should be able to take out all of her Pokemon, she's only able to take down the first one, Banette, while Frostlass takes me out with Blizzards. I go on to bring in Spiritomb and Sucker Punch it out of here, but Tapu Fini then comes out, a fairy water type that's not ghost at all. So I decided to just set up 3 nasty plots because it can't really touch me all that much, as it kept on spamming Defog and Taunt, but eventually it did go for Scald and it brought me down to 13 HP and a burn before I could finally take it out with Dark Pulses. Mimikyu then finishes me off off with a Thunderbolt of all things, just after I hit a Sucker Punch. I bring in Tyranitar, finish it off with a Stone Edge while tanking a Playrough, and his Palossand then Giga Drains me out of here, so I have to bring in Dundee with a Crunch to bring out the very last Pokemon, Delmise, who once again crits crunched. Ending a battle that was way harder than I would have expected. I then went over to Hala because I thought that he was going to be the hardest one and I just wanted to get him out of the way, but as it turns out, he wasn't as hard as I would have expected. I started off by setting up 2 nasty plots on his Hariyama. Luckily for me, he missed his Mega Move that I could proceed to one-shot it and his next Pokemon Conkeldurr with Air Slashes. But he had the perfect counter ready, Tapu Koko. So I hit a Dark Pulse and luckily flinched. I barely did any damage, so I knew I wasn't going to survive a Thunderbolt after this, so I brought in Dundee to counter it out and Earthquake, taking down the legendary Guardian. Next Pokemon Medicham took an Earthquake pretty well and then Ice Punched me. So I sent out Spiritomb, ascended to the Shadow Dimension, and Beware came out next. After it Earthquaked me, I decided to go into Joey, who could only hit 1 cross shove because of the accuracy, causing him to be able to set up a Swords Dance and take me out with Hammer Arm the next turn, just like my next Pokemon Mandibuzz. Greninja then finished it off with Surf, and the last Pokemon Poliwrath fell to a critical hit extrasensory. With a little bit of luck here and there, we managed to get through Hala, meaning that we can go to the Steel-type room and challenge Molayne. And here we only needed 2 Pokemon, starting out with Dundee to take down Bisharp with Earthquake. Tapu Bulu came out, so I swapped in Joey to Flare Blitz it, and while it took it out, I did take some very major damage, and because of the recoil, my Wrestling Cat was no more. Dundee then finished off Magnezone with Earthquake, just like Metagross, Alolan Sandslash, and finally the regional Typhlosion. He might have had one of the coolest teams we've faced in this run, but it was definitely one of the easiest to beat. On to our last opponent before the champion, Olivia. She started off with a living map, Relicanth, so Dundee just Earthquaked that twice, but he did get yawned and put to sleep when Tapu Lele came out. Since I was asleep anyway, I started to attack with Earthquake and Crunch, until I eventually woke up and got it down into red health. Then she used the full restore, I managed to hit 1 more Crunch, and the hidden power finally took down my Dial of the Crook. I tried to then take it out with Spiritomb's Dark Pulses, and just when I'm about to do so, she swaps out into Golem, which shocked me quite a bit, and forced me to swap out into Greninja. Here we get an easy kill with Surf, Tapu Lele comes back out, which we can also take down with just a single Surf. Lycanroc dies to 2 of them, but also is able to hit a Stone Edge and do a ton of damage on me. I Hydro Pump her Unovian Arbok, and lastly Probopass survives with a abundance of HP and discharges me. I then give Tyranitar some much needed blood with an Earthquake, and that defeats Olivia. Time to take the big stairs up to the champion's room, but who's actually going to be the champion? Kukui? There's no how in this, so it definitely can be how. As it turns out, it's going to be the anime boy himself, Ash. We see the amazing battle screen one last time and enter our very last fight as he starts off with a Decidueye. And I luckily led off with Incineroar, so I'm about to take it out with Flare Blitz, but he swaps out into his Lycanroc, saving his Decidueye for later. I bring in Tyranitar thinking that I can definitely take 2 hits from this, and I was totally wrong, as Stone Edge cripples my Godzilla. I bring in Greninja because I can outspeed, then use Surf, but Pikachu comes out. Knowing that it will go for an electric type move, I bring in Dundee and Earthquake it. This makes him swap out into Decidueye the turn after, so I go into Dishonored and hit 2 Air Slashes, and just when I'm about to take it out with a third, Melmetal comes in, saving his Decidueye once more. I let Mandibuzz go down by a double Iron Bash, bring in my Crocodile and use Earthquake on it. This turns out to not be enough at all because it's super bulky, so once Crocodile gets bashed back into the desert where he came from, Joey can come in, Flare Blitz, and that is that. He brings out an Incineroar of his own, which is very scary, and I'm super glad he didn't go for a fighting type move on my switch into Greninja here, meaning that I could outspeed the turn after and kill with Hydro Pump. The Decidueye then comes out, I use an extra sensory, but it isn't enough, and I thought this was the battle over, but the Sandstorm damage from Tyranitar Sandstream kicks in, taking down his Robin Hood and forcing out his last Pokemon Naganadel against Soul Eater. I thought I could at least take 1 hit of this thing, but a Dragon Gem boosted Draco Meteor that's also a critical hit is a teeny tiny bit too much for my 1000 souls. I only had one more Pokemon remaining, Joey, and after tanking a Sludge Wave, we counter back with 2 more Outragers and only 39 HP remaining to win the last battle against Ash. A super close one, but we managed to come out on top. This crowns us champion of Pokemon Moonblack 2 with only Dark type Pokemon. I do have to say that I quite enjoyed this ROM hack. It was definitely a breath of fresh air from regular DS hacks, but it's only really enjoyable because it's based on Pokemon Blaze Black 2, and I feel like they could have done so much more with the story. Like, they could have totally changed it around for Team Skull, but they didn't and just left it how it was, which was kind of disappointing. Besides that, the gameplay is super fun. There isn't really all that many added events from the regular Blaze Black 2 Redux, which definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but it was very fun seeing all of these characters of the 3DS era put into an actual DS game. So as my verdict, I'm going to give this game a 6.5 out of 10. And again, if they would change the story around, this could easily go up to an 8 or a 9. I wouldn't say this is a must-play, but definitely a fun ROM hack to try out. So with all of that out of the way, I want to thank my membership and Patreon supporters for supporting the channel, and if you want to do so yourself, you can click the links in the description. It is always appreciated, but not needed. Do keep in mind that if you choose to join the Discord server and you're a member on YouTube or a Patreon supporter, you get access to a chat with all of the other members and supporters where we can all chat together. So now with all of that out of the way, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I'm Zwiggo, and I'll see you guys next time.